Welcome back to the Gary Sutton Show on WSBA. I've been looking forward to this interview for a while. We had this booked a few weeks ago, and this gentleman is the founder of and president of Sweetbread Ministries. He's a common, everyday, regular guy, except for a couple little things. He has a fascinating and pretty inspiring story, and he was just featured on the History Channel's Medical Mysteries Decoded, if you watch that show, as having the #1 world's most extreme medical miracle ever documented. You can get ready for an inspiring interview this morning, and then maybe an amazing interview as well, as we welcome Bruce Van Natta to the show. Bruce, it's great to have you on the show. Good morning to you.
Well, thanks for having me on your show, Gary.
Bruce, you read this story. I'm going to let you tell it because it is an amazing story, and where it has taken you since is also fairly amazing. But tell us a little bit about the story that got you to the History Channel and got you writing and got you starting Sweetbread Ministries.
Well, that actually happened 8 years ago, just 2 days ago. So the 16th of November, 8 years ago, 2006.
Wow.
I owned a business where I traveled around here in the state of Wisconsin doing on-site repair, diesel engines. And that day I was about an hour away from my home working on a great big Peterbilt logging truck. I had started that job on Tuesday, and it was Thursday night. I was just finishing it up. I was called in because it was leaking coolant. And when I got to the end of the job, we started the engine on this big truck inside a big implement garage. I was working with the driver / part-time mechanic for that logging company. And we got to the end of the job, I started it just to make sure it was no longer leaking. And while it was running up to temperature, I was putting away my tools on my service truck. And the guy come up and tapped me on the shoulder and said, "Hey, before you go, I've just got like one more thing I'd like you to look at." And I remember looking up the clock, and it was 6:10 p.m., and I'd left my house at 6 that morning. And it was an hour drive, and I was thinking, you know what? It'll just take a couple minutes, and I'll be out of here, and it'll be like a 13.5-hour day. And it was cold, and I was hungry, and I was just thinking it'd be nice to get home, whatever. And then what he had was he had a big dirty spot in the engine that he kept cleaning off periodically. He said he kept coming back, so he knew the engine was seeping oil somewhere, and it didn't drip out. He didn't have to add oil, and, So he's got this big dirty spot in this big Caterpillar yellow engine that bothered him. So I said, "Where is it?" And he said, "In the front." So anybody listening today, if you've never looked underneath a great big semi-truck, like from the front bumper looking towards the back, you'd see the lowest thing to the ground is this front axle that the two front wheels are attached to. And it's got 10 to 12,000 pounds, so 5 to 6 tons of weight on the two front tires. And this guy, Leonard, had jacked up that axle, and it goes from the left to the right. And the reason why it's so low is because of the drop axle configuration.
Right.
There's maybe, not too much space between the bottom of that axle and the blacktop or cement or whatever it's on. And so a little guy like me could just barely go underneath one of those axles with the truck sitting there. A bigger guy would have to go around it. So I get on this creeper, little thing that mechanics lay on vehicles, lay on my back, and I go underneath the front bumper feet first, and I stopped. And I said to him, "Hey, why don't you jump up beside the truck and shut the engine off so it's up to, 180 degrees. Well, what he had done was he had jacked up that axle on the passenger side in order to remove the passenger side front wheel. And that was so that we could get in close to the engine and do the job. Well, that wheel wasn't back on yet. The air cleaner was off. There was some stuff he's going to finish up the next day, stuff he could handle. And so I lay on the creeper. I go underneath the bumper, feet first, and I end up laying underneath this axle. When he jacked it up, he had not used any safety equipment, no jack stands, no blocking, any type. The only thing that's holding up is a little round bottle jack. And so I'm underneath it, and it's my own fault. I saw that he hadn't used any safety equipment, but it had been on the jack for 3 days. I'd been running for 20 minutes. So I slip underneath this thing, and that axle's going right across my midsection, basically right over my belly button. And that axle's like, 3-4 inches, at least 4 inches front to back.
Right.
So the whole soft tissue between the bottom of your ribs and the top of your pelvic bone is where that axle's going across left to right. Just happened to be where I stopped. I'm looking up at the engine. He gets in the truck shifts. I see peripheral vision. In the peripheral vision of my left eye, I see movement. And what happened was that I just turned my head just in time to see the jack. It's supposed to be holding up the axle, wiggle, and then shoot out like a rocket. That axle comes down across my midsection like a blunt guillotine and just crushes my body in half. On impact, when this thing found me, blood shot up from the inside of my body into my mouth, like rocketed out of my mouth when it fell on me. So this 5 to 6 tons of weight falls across my midsection, and it hits the cement on as I'm laying on my back would be my left hand, bang, this great big loud, huge bang. It's on the cement. And it's coming up at an angle across the middle of my body because the right side wheel is still on.
Right.
Yeah. So it hits the cement, bang, the blood shoots out. And at that point, I just called out to God. I said, God, help me. I know people have heard the saying, there's no such thing as atheist in foxhole. And the majority of my life, I had drugs and alcohol and partying. And, I had a successful business and, a great family and everything, but I wasn't Mr. Perfect majority of my life. And so this thing falls me. I call it to God, and the guy jumps down in the truck. He looks underneath there, and he goes into shock immediately because when I look down at myself after this thing fell on me, if you can picture this, laying on your back underneath the truck, when it fell across my middle section, after I called it to God, I looked on the left side of my body, and right there at the left edge of my body, there was only about an inch of airspace between the bottom of the axle and the cement.
Oh, my God.
So I know I'm an inch thick, literally, and I'm not exaggerating.
Right.
I look to the right side of my body, and there's about 2 inches airspace between the bottom of the axle and cement, because, again, it's coming up at an angle. I was thinner than my vertebrae. There's proof right there that I'm not exaggerating. My vertebrae were broken the width of the axle, according to radiology and doctor reports. So 2 vertebrae broken the width of the axle, spider cracked, D-shaped, and the lumbar snapped right off. So it's got me pinned down, basically crushed in half. He goes in shock. I beg him to call 911. He finally does. Then the jack, launched out of there so hard it got stuck in the wall. He pulls the jack out of the wall, gets it out of the wall. He can't put the jack back underneath the axle because the axle's now in the cement. And so he's looking for a place to jack it up. And he's panicking, and he puts it underneath the leaf spring, which is a curved apparatus for the suspension. Right, exactly. And so anybody who knows anything about mechanical, you don't want to jack something up on a curve, right? And so he's jacking it up on this curve, and I'm begging him. I could just mumble. I could barely talk, but I'm saying, please, not there. Don't jack it up there, because I'm afraid the jack is going to slip. And he's, jacking this thing up, and it goes up about an inch, and it does slip.
Did it again?
But it didn't come down hard. It just slipped gradually, but it's stuck on the top of the jack. Then stuck into like a bolt or a rivet that was through this leaf spring, where all the leaves were bolted together or riveted together on one on each end. That's where the head of the jack stopped.
Good
and then
grief.
he started jacking it up again. And I'm begging him, please, not there. Because I'm just this jack is just going to shoot out again. Stupid truck's going to fall on me again. And so he jacks it up, and it's off of me, and I'm just totally freaking out. I'm starting to go in shock physically, obviously, too. And I looked down, and I remember looking down on my body after he jacked it up off of me. And what I saw was my work uniform went to the edge of my ribs and then went straight down right to my backbone, went flat all the way across the middle section, basically my stomach, and then came up back at my pelvic bone. And this sounds crazy, but when I saw that, I thought, man, this looks like something straight out of a cartoon. Wile E. Coyote getting run over by an Acme truck or something like that. That's immediately the thought that came to me. This is cartoonish. And then the next thought was, there's no way I'm going to be able to live. And I should be able to be alive and look at myself like this. It was so surreal. So I'm freaking out.
So that stuff actually is going through your mind as you're lying there, and you're really thinking that. That's it's amazing when someone's in that kind of situation. None of us know what would we think, and you're going through some bizarre thoughts there for sure.
Yeah, I'm just freaking out, and I'm looking at myself, and I'm just afraid that the jack's going to flip. So I'm begging him, please, get me off from underneath here, please. I'm begging him. He won't touch me. Most people are told you don't want to move somebody that's got a broken back, and
right.
I'm flat across the middle, right? So he won't touch me. The creeper, thank God, was a hollow core plastic creeper. So when his truck fell on me, the creeper just collapsed to nothing. Literally, it just collapsed to nothing the width where it was pressed, And so the creeper is flattened out, broken in the middle, and he won't touch me. So I'm scared. I'm going to shock, and I'm afraid the truck's going to fall. So I reach back behind my head. I grab the bottom of that chrome bumper because I was just underneath the front of the truck. I grabbed the bottom of the chrome bumper, and it took everything I had, but I dragged myself out to the point that now just my head and shoulders are sticking out from underneath the front bumper, and I couldn't move it anymore. That's as far as I could move myself, and I slumped right there. Well, then the first responder gets it. It's in the middle of nowhere, Wisconsin. Literally, very, very rural Wisconsin. Volunteer fire department. There was a guy who was on the volunteer fire department, just happened to be on his way home from work, driving close to the area. So he was there within minutes. He gets there. The second guy gets there. They're trying to talk to me. They take one look at me. They know nothing can be done locally, so they call MedFlight. And it stretched out. So then it was about that point, after I don't know how many minutes after pulling myself up from underneath the truck, and they showed up. They didn't even move me. They just left me right where I was. And it was right around there I died. And I can say I died for a couple reasons. According to the responders, I lost my heartbeat and lost my pulse. According to the doctors, the reason why is because I had 5 places, major arteries were completely severed. That's why History Channel and many doctors say, well, for one thing, they can't find anybody in the world, anywhere in the world that has ever lived with 5 major arteries completely severed, which I had.
Yeah, that's incredible.
If I die, I bleed out. My spirit leaves my body. I have one of those crazy out-of-body experiences. I go up into the roof of the garage, and I'm just looking down from above, watching the whole thing play out. And from above, my view from others, I'm looking down, and I see the guy that I've been working with. He's on his knees. He's running his fingers through my head. He's crying. He's apologizing and saying he's sorry because he jacked up the truck and not use safety equipment, right? And so he's just saying, I'm sorry, and all that. And the guys, the first responders, they just stood back, and at that point, they call ambulance and to get the body, and so they're just, I'm watching and listening all from above. But then all of a sudden, on each side of my body, there's 2 humongous angels, about 8 feet tall. They had their hands in the middle of my body where I'm crushed flat. They didn't move, they didn't talk, and they didn't have wings or anything, but there were these great big guys in white robes, and the robes were made of this weird material, looked like rope. They just had their hands right in the middle where I was flat. And it didn't even seem like a big deal at the time. And I just for some reason, seemed normal as I was watching from above. And I'm just watching all these people, and then this lady, one of the very last, her and another guy were the last 2 responders to get to the scene of the accident from this volunteer fire department. She gets down between the angels. She asks those guys, what's going on? And they said, he's passed. And she starts feeling for pulse, and she's feeling him. She can't find him. She turns to Leonard. She says, what's his name? He says, Bruce Leonard. She starts patting him in the face and saying, Bruce Leonard, open your eyes. And these 2 guys that are standing on the side over to, as I'm looking from above on, my left, they're giving her the crazy lady look. Like, what are you doing, lady? He hasn't had a pulse for, several minutes. What are you doing? And she just started yelling my name, Bruce Leonard, open your eyes. Open your eyes. And next thing I knew, my spirit just came back out of the ceiling, back down into my body. It seemed like it came in through the head. My eyes opened up, and when my eyes opened up, my heart started. And I'm looking at this woman face to face, and all of a sudden, I have this incredible pain, right? I feel like a semi-truck is falling on me or something. And I'm in just incredible pain. And I'm looking at it, and it hurt so bad, I just closed my eyes. And when I closed my eyes, my heart stopped again, and a tunnel appeared off to my right at about a 45-degree angle with a light on the end of it. And I started rocketing away in this tunnel towards the light. I wasn't definitely going back in the ceiling again. And somewhere in the back behind me somewhere, it seemed like I could hear her call my name again, pat my face, and she calls me back in my body. It happens 2 or 3 times. And then I believe God spoke to me, and I heard him say, if you want to live, you're going to have to fight, and it's going to be a hard fight. Wow. And then all of a sudden, this lady says, Mister, what do you have to fight for? Do you have a wife? Do you have kids? And then I remembered I had a wife and 4 small kids. And it was enough to make me go, I can't fight for myself. It hurt too bad, but I can fight for them. So I kept my eyes open. They end up, ambulance takes me to the local hospital. MedFlight picks me up there, takes me in. They cut me open, and that's what they found: 5 arteries severed, spleen, pancreas, intestines.
So your intestines were so badly damaged that the doctor couldn't even save enough intestines to sustain your life.
Exactly. Yep.
And then,
exactly.
And we're going to come back. I want to take a very quick break. We'll come back and tell you about the other miracle with regard to the intestines, because there's something there that the doctors couldn't explain as well, and more about your experience, Bruce. Unbelievable story. We'll be right back with you, Bruce Van Natta, with us here on the Gary Sutton Show on WSBA. Hear more of his story when we return. Welcome back to the Gary Sutton Show with Bruce Van Natta, a man who was just recently featured on the History Channel's Medical Mysteries Decoded as having the world's #1 most extreme medical miracle ever documented. And he's back with us here on the Gary Sutton Show. So you're at the hospital now after this 10,000-pound axle, and this truck falls on you. You've seen 2 angels. You've seen a woman who came and called you back. They're looking inside. They're seeing the unbelievable damage that you have. We said that one of the doctors couldn't even save enough intestines to sustain your life, but you survived. And one of the amazing things about your intestines, I'll let you tell that story, Bruce.
So, yeah, they saved 2 little pieces of intestine. An average adult has 18 to 20-some feet of small intestine lengthwise, and they were only able to come up with a couple feet between 2 pieces that they sewed together. That one of those was damaged, but they were trying to get as much as they could. It wasn't enough to sustain life, so I'm being fed intravenously. I end up spending, the next year in and out of the hospital, more in than out. And about halfway through that year, I'm wasting away. I look like somebody out of a concentration camp, literally. I'm starving to death. I can't eat. And that's when the doctors finally admit to us they can only keep me alive a year to year and a half total. on 100% intravenous feeding. And then my wife puts me on prayer chains, like she's calling people and having people pray for me around the country,
right.
churches. And this guy hears about it out from New York, and he feels like the Lord told him to come to Wisconsin, where I live, and pray for me in the hospital.
Wow.
And he blew it off the first morning it happened. He said God woke him up at like 5 a.m. and he blew it off. The second morning it happened. He told his wife about it. And then the second morning he just was obedient. He bought the plane ticket, came out, prayed for me in the hospital, and instantaneously I literally felt my intestines coming back. A creative miracle happened when he prayed. What's so amazing is it's so documented because they had given me so many CAT scans and x-rays, plus they had me cut open, plus it had been measured to a centimeter. So when he prayed for me, I got 9 to 11 feet back, which is half my intestines, which is enough to work perfectly. And so that's the reason why I'm alive 8 years later. And, they even did one more operation after that to take out my gallbladder and a rib that never grew back. The gallbladder got damaged because of the several months of intravenous feeding, wrecked it. That's why they can't keep you long-term alive intravenous, because it begins to wreck your internal organs. And so the doctors themselves visually then saw all the intestines that came back because they knew exactly what had been in there.
We have about 5 minutes left, but I wanted to, so you have made, by all accounts, a full recovery from this.
Absolutely, yeah. I had to learn to walk again. I started out with a walker and then a cane, but if you saw me walking on the street or walk into your place of business, you wouldn't even know there was anything wrong with me at all in the past unless I lifted up my shirt and showed all the scars.
Well, you talked about before we went to break that you remember what kept you alive was the idea that you were keeping yourself alive for your 4 kids and your wife, and I'm looking at your webpage, and beautiful family, by the way. And you turned your life around after that. Tell us a little bit about that.
It was such a life-changing situation. Life-changing, doesn't even cut it. That's not even close, but that's the best words I've got to describe it. I know that I've been given a second chance. I know that when I called out and said, God help me, he did. He sent the angels, he sent that lady to come, she prayed me back to life. Then he sent this guy from New York to come put me on get intestines. All these amazing, amazing miracles. Again, totally documented, totally real. It's not something that happened in my head. And so I know that it's my job now for the rest of my life to just tell people, hey, God is real. This spirit realm, all that stuff, it is real. And, I just feel like if I don't, tell people, I would actually be doing injustice because, I know what it's like when my spirit left my body, and I believe that when we die, our spirit does leave our body, and it's going to go somewhere, and we need to figure out where it's going.
Have you had any experiences since then that have kind of said, kind of see what we did? Anything like that?
Any experiences that what?
Spirits that maybe came back and said, see, here's what we did to help you, and now you can help others. Anything along that line?
Absolutely. Absolutely. That's exactly what Sweetbread Ministry is about. I travel around the world speaking constantly, and we pray for people, and we've seen God do amazing miracles. Obviously not every prayer that we pray for a person gets healed, every person gets healed, nothing like that. But we literally have seen blind eyes open, deaf ears open. We've seen crooked bones go straight. We've seen people get out of wheelchairs. We've seen it happen. We just saw somebody get out of a wheelchair in British Columbia 2 weeks ago. Somebody totally confined to a wheelchair got up and ran. Totally 100% healed. I wish it happened every time. It doesn't, but when it does happen, even if they are the minority, not the majority, when it does happen, it just ignites the faith of everybody there, and me. Yeah,
people, by the way, can go to sweetbreadministries.com to see more about Bruce and his story and what he's done since then. Let me ask you a final question.
Yeah.
And I'm sure this question's crossed your mind at some point in time, and I just wonder if you were able to come up with an answer. Why you? Why you?
What? I know exactly why me. God gave me the answer. It's found in 1 Corinthians chapter 1, verse 26 and on. It says God chooses the foolish things, the lowly things, the things that are not, the things that are despised, so that no one may boast before him. I spent the majority of my life doing drugs every single day, selling drugs, living in rebellion to God and man completely. And I believe it just is a proof that if God would hear my prayer, if God would send angels for me, my last name literally means trouble in my hometown. From my grandpa to my dad to me and my brothers, from the wrong side of the tracks, family trouble. And if God would send someone for Van Natta, if God would send somebody for me when I'm the least deserving, then it really is mercy, it really is grace, and shows that we don't deserve it. So, even the 2 books that I wrote, Saved by Angels, to share how God talks to everyday people. That's what it's about. God just loving everyday people, and we don't deserve it. And then the new book, A Miraculous Life, again, God wants a miraculous life for everyone where we just feel His love, walk in it, and know that He's real.
Where can people find your books, by the way, Bruce?
Oh, Amazon.com, local bookstores, Saved by Angels, and A Miraculous Life.
I think a great time of the year to read that, too. And also go to sweetbreadministries.com. Bruce, an amazing story. And I really appreciate you telling it with us here this morning. Thank you so much for being our guest. And I'm so glad that you are touching so many other lives out there, too, based on a horrible incident that turned it around.
Thanks for the opportunity, Gary.
Bruce, thanks so much. Take care.
Thank you. Bye.
Bruce Van Natta with us on the Gary Sutton Show. One of the more inspiring stories you're going to want to hear, and was recently featured, as we said, on the Medical Mysteries Decoded on the History Channel as having the world's #1 most extreme medical miracle ever documented.